welcome back to You Can't Make This Shit Up. That is your host, Joe Hoxley, and that is your host, David Washington, and I am your host from far, far away, Kellen Clark. And before we actually get into the story, I want to tell you a favorite expression of mine. It goes something like this. A person is presented with a problem. It's a four-way intersection with no stoplights and a high speed limit. Tons of accidents, tons of injuries. Some people will resolve to build a new highway, very expensive, very impractical. Some smart people will put in traffic lights and lower that speed limit, but the majority of people will resolve to build a hospital. And we're getting a new hospital here in America today, and another amendment too. David, what do you got?
Okay, thank you, Kellen.
Listen, I'll take it, David. Representative Anna Eskamani warns the House State Affairs of Committee's dangerous steps towards an Article 5 convention to amend the U.S. Constitution. The convention, lacking rules and potential influenced by unelected, unaccountable delegates and corporate money, could endanger cherished rights. Four campaigns are pushing for this, with 28 states already on board. Eskamani highlights two concerning resolutions: HCR 693 for the congressional term limits and HCR 703 enforcing a balanced budget possibility, threatening social programs. She voted against these and argues contacting state representatives to oppose them, emphasizing the need to protect the Constitution from extremist manipulation. Let's go, Dave.
Wow. Article 5 convention. This is the end game. This is what everything is culminating to in regards to the conservative movement, in my opinion. I believe everything that conservatives have been doing over a generation, more than a generation since the Great Society, that conservatives are looking to change the Constitution through methods as prescribed through the Constitution of these United States. And so, one, I do applaud the conservative efforts to do this. Progressives attempted to do this during the 70s with the Equal Rights Amendment, which I think is still kind of out there, still looking for the X number of states to ratify this in their state legislatures. Um, but this particular situation is impressive. I understand that Representative Eskamani is here on fire. People, be aware of this. We got to do something. We can't let this happen. Here in Florida, I believe the two resolutions will pass and move this Article 5 issue closer and closer to an actual attempt to change the Constitution. I applaud the effort. Am I agreement with some of the proposed ideas? No, the balanced budget. You can't treat government like a business. We just government entities do not operate like businesses. A balanced budget will handcuff what we need to do in order to protect us, to fulfill the tenets of our Constitution and of our laws. So that's where I'm at in regards to this particular
Wow,
issue.
it blows my mind that we expect a household to keep their budget balanced, but yet issue with we don't have any issue with the government spending money they don't even have, and not even on credit that they even have. So no, I believe that we don't even we avoid the budget process all because of the same reason. But and Eskamani, if this was a Article 5 convention for the ERA, you'd be all on it. This is total political, 100%. She's scared to death because conservatives are doing something to affect change to the Constitution in a way that she doesn't like the fact that so many states, there are more states in the 50 states that are actually run by conservatives. We've had more conservative, governors. This leads to the fact that if the states were to get together, this would be a very effective convention. So that's she doesn't want our state, which is a conservative state, being involved in a conservative cause, which I'm sorry, last time I looked, Democrats are the reason that this provision even exists. We wouldn't have a nation without this provision. I think that Anna Eskamani should be more constitutionalist and allow the sky's not falling. It doesn't necessarily mean that we meet and it passes. Just like you said, David, a balanced budget. The state of Florida has to run on a balanced budget. Yet we've been doing it, and yet you don't like it for the country itself. So those are things that we have to be able to discuss. And an Article 5 convention, that's what you do. You discuss what the amendment looks like. What do we like? What do we not like? What's going to stop it from passing? How are we going to stop Washington from beating Michigan is the next question that we'll have to ask. And thank God we had that conversation. See, we would have Washington playing FSU if truly we had somebody who could compete with Michigan. No.
Ouch! Go dogs! Go
So,
dogs!
I give it an ouch for FSU.
and impressive games that nobody could dominate either one of them. Washington did play better. Washington did play better than any of the three teams that were on the field. I will give you credit. I'll give you this little high five on that one. But David, this was very interesting. I was very surprised to see that Anna Eskamani had fear of the Constitution, fear of this. I mean, simply. So let's look at it this way. Those in favor of an Article 5 convention would argue that the provision is an integral part of the United States Constitution, allowing the method of amending the outside of the constitutional initiatives, right? So
Right.
this is because your Congress isn't doing what you're supposed to. This is more democratic than having your representatives give you the middle finger, right?
Well, here's the undemocratic part that Representative Eskamani and organizations like Common Cause is having with this is that there are no rules to the Article 5 convention. And so any issue, not just a single issue, but any issue can be brought up, which we see that um, the issue of I'm sorry, I'm drawing the blank of the balanced budget,
Term
amendment,
limits.
term limits. Any of these issues can be brought up, even the
Well,
Constitution.
the only way you're gonna get term limits is through an Article 5 convention, because there's no way they're going to allow it in Congress.
And individuals a part of this convention are unelected, unaccountable to anyone but the special interests that they serve. So again, another hair on fire, situation for Eskamani, Common Cause, and their allies. They're saying, wait a second, we can't say no, we can. Yes, we can. It's in our Constitution, and conservatives. Again, I tip my hat to conservatives. I think this has been an effort for at least a generation to move
Mhm.
forward issues that they hold dearly, that they believe will move America, the United States of America, forward through the constitutional process, through the legal
I think
process.
I think the scary part for an Eskamani is that it's already so close. It's at a point where Florida could be a tipping point in getting
Yeah.
this thing to actually off the ground. I mean, if we were like 30 states away, she'd be like, I don't really care.
Sure.
But yet,
And
there
I'm
are no rules.
sure.
There are no rules, and the reason there are no rules is because it's a gathering of the people. The rules will be set at the convention. The leadership will rise from the convention, and that's the beauty of it. It's very democratic in that way, and Democrats don't like democracy. They don't like democracy. They don't have a democratic system to get their president. They have special, voting rights where you have super delegates who have the power of 5 over one vote. It's not one vote for one person in the Democratic Party. It's very undemocratic. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I can't have who I want to be my vice chair because I ended up wanting a guy to be the chair. So now I have to select a woman to be my vice chair. The Democratic Party has not been a democracy since I've known them. So good kudos to her in keeping keeping in line with her uh, socialist agenda.
And
Kellen?
we and I think and I by and large agree. It's expressly stated in the Constitution that it is within the states' rights to do this, and every aspect in government, well, most aspects in government, do take in consideration from people on the outside. Whether it's lobbyists representing interest groups, whether it's in the courts with something like an amicus brief, you always seek guidance and additional views from people directly outside the government. It's how you stay in touch. How much of an influence money has is a relevant discussion to have, but whether or not the sky is falling, not so sure about that. I don't take any issue with the procedures of passing these amendments, but I do have some issues with the amendments themselves.
Sure.
Let's talk about it. So I think we'll start with the less complicated of the two. Not that either are too complicated, but we'll start with the term limits, which is being championed by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. What it states is that senators will have a 2-term limit, and congressmen will have a 3-term limit. So a congressman can serve for 6 years, a senator for 12. Of course, you could do both and serve for 18 total. So I think there is certainly merits to having term limits for these things. Like Dianne Feinstein was approaching triple digits before she died. It's someone who's that old can't be in touch with an issue with the complicated issues of AI and social media
Age
and data and
discrimination on our show today.
cyberspace.
A little
What?
age discrimination on our show today. We got that. Got the old people getting all upset with us now. Listen, I'm not.
Let's let Kellen finish.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted
And
to let you know that poor lady died in office, and you're tearing her tearing her
no,
down.
oh no, I'm not tearing. I'm not. This is not disrespect to Feinstein specifically. That was
Hey,
more
Strom
to.
Thurmond died in office too, so let's talk about Strom. He had
Oh,
the
a lot of people
longest
die in
term
office. I was
ever.
just picking her because she was almost in
Most
triple
recent.
digits.
Yeah.
It's that somebody.
Strom, she didn't beat Strom, so you can't do
No,
that.
she did not beat Strom Thurmond. She did not beat Strom Thurmond, Dixiecrat turned Republican. But
Kellen. Mhm.
anyways, when you reach this very upper level of age, and it keeps going up and up and up, it becomes harder to stay in tune with many of our biggest issues, which exist in cyberspace. Sometimes it's in social media, it's in data collection, it's going to be slash is in AI, it's in all these other things. And you have a lot of senators specifically who have flip phones and who only recently upgraded. And so then you have that issue comes into play often. And I do understand completely understand where amendments like this come from. However, I do also have concerns. Like there's a reason there's not a lot of young people in the seats. Part of it is that incumbency advantage, but a lot of it is that there's not very many running. And when you run through your best candidates quickly, they're in, they're out. Maybe on one hand, they can provide great service. On the other hand, eventually in a certain district, you will not be having good candidates running. You will have more inexperienced candidates because it'll be perpetual inexperience. 6 years in Congress, I think I think it's fine to explore terms, but 6 years for Congress, I think, is too low. I think it's too low because you want people. Maybe you don't want career politicians, but you want people to gain experience. Chances are their first term will not be quite as smooth as the subsequent terms, because starting a new job, these things happen. If you don't
There's a
allow,
lot to break
if
down.
yeah, and if you don't allow experience to accrue in at least some amount, then you're having a perpetually inexperienced government. And so 6 years is simply not good enough, I think, for Congress. I think 12 for the Senate is more reasonable, and I think something similar like that to Congress would be better.
Well, the House is for the people. So the House is for the people. There should be no term limits in the House of Representatives ever. The
I'd
Senate
agree with
is state. The Senate is state run. Term limits on the Senate should be determined by the states, not by anybody else. So, with that said, I'm anti-term limit because I believe that the only way you can that the true term limit is the ballot box, and if we do our job correctly, we'll know who's doing their job and who's not. We need to get this dead set. I like my congressman, but I hate Congress mentality
Right.
out, and start talking about who should we replace our congressman with if we need to, because they're not doing what we need them to do. That's always where I've stood. Bureaucracy is the problem. It's the people behind the congressman, like when Dianne Feinstein is being told how to vote by her staff, there's a problem, because you evidently you could see that in her final days in office.
Also,
Go ahead, David. I didn't mean to
Also,
hog the.
to go further, I agree with you in regards to term limits. I'm not in favor of term limits. Allow voters to determine when to end a particular elected official's term. Leave it to the people. Granted, I'm not in agreement with people sitting in office for decades. It,
Agree.
it just it, it just doesn't allow for a more progressive or uh, it's hard to I don't want to use certain
evolution
terms.
of thought.
Thank you.
Evolution
That's
of
better.
thought.
Evolution of thought, especially when you have, someone sitting in office for decades, or potentially sitting in office for decades because of how these
Mhm.
districts are created, and
Yeah.
the diversity of thought, experience will be missing. And
Mhm.
also, I think you move further away from people actively being engaged in civic duty.
Yep.
If you have term limits, and if voters are not encouraged to engage um, in civics and in voting, um, we have to do better. And this current Congress, what they passed, what, less than 30 bills, or
Sounds about
created
right.
30 laws. This
That's by
this doesn't make sense. This is horrible. And to
that's the because we don't have bipartisanship any longer, David. If
Yeah.
we had bipartisanship, we would get a lot more accomplished. But I do want to attack. I do want to attack our colleague here on the fact that he doesn't look at the budgets of the senators and the congressmen, because not a single congressman has purchased a flip phone in their budget, as I just looked up. So they do have smartphones. Most of them have
Most of them do
iPhones.
now.
Most of them have iPhones, and
Most of them do.
your attack on them is false because you didn't look at their budgets. So make sure you have
Ah,
facts before you go there,
I
and
got
stop the age discrimination thing. Because I'm 56 now. This year I enter the year as 56. I'm going to start looking at Social Security benefits and how they work and when I have to apply. No,
look at them
I
very
did.
closely, because they could be
But
on the chopping block.
David tells me to bring facts, so I just wanted to make sure I had facts. But
Hey,
um,
and that's all fair. They don't. I'm sure they definitely used to.
it did say it
Um,
was a good soundbite, though. It was. It
oh yeah,
really was.
thank you.
So,
The point
Okay.
by and large is that it's hard to be involved in the movement of that industry, the movement of social media, because they're
Yeah.
too busy. You know, when someone's in Senate for a long time, they're busy. They're working on budgets. They're working on defense. They're working on this and that and that and this,
No,
which
they
is
don't work.
important.
They
They're doing their
fundraise.
job.
No, they don't work. They fundraise. Read my book. It's in bringing America together again. If you read my book, you'll know exactly what a congressman and a
Doing their
senator
job.
does the majority of the time.
Oh, but
And the
you know,
media
speaking of
and the media
budget,
runs everything. But let's get to the balanced budget
yeah, let's
amendment.
talk about budgets because I have a feeling
Let,
that
let, let's
I have
let's
a
Let's
talk
talk
about
about
feeling
this
that
now.
it's the Wild West here.
let's talk about balanced budget amendments. Most states run on a balanced budget. It's basically making an assumption of your income. How much tax dollars are we going to bring in? And if we meet these tax obligations and the money does come in, this is where we can spend. So balanced budget doesn't mean that you're going to get all the money that you need to spend, but it's to at least get an estimate of, hey, how much money are we taking in? How much money should we be putting out? That's all it is. And
Yeah.
we've abandoned all fiscal responsibility whatsoever
Right.
in the fact that we how many have you ever figured that tomorrow you just don't like the $10,000 credit line that you have in all your credit cards? So you want to
Oh,
double that. So let's make it
all
20.
set.
Let's make it 20,000. So let's just call
Mhm.
them up and tell them that because the end of the year is coming, we just want to eliminate the amount of money on our credit cards and up it by 50%.
However,
I
federal
mean,
government needs to have that flexibility in times of national emergencies, war. Um, Again, government is not a business, and especially at the states are a different story. Every state has their own state constitution, and so if they determine that having a balanced budget is going to be incorporated into their law, into their constitution, more power to them. But however, federal government is, I believe, needs that flexibility and should not be handcuffed by these requirements of a balanced budget.
no, Jim,
So this amendment.
how long did we go? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you both, but
No, no, sorry. Just
history guy kind of saying, how long did we go before we actually had a deficit?
Haven't we always had a deficit, given that
No, we have not.
we
no,
borrowed money for the Revolutionary War,
not any
Civil
meaningful
War?
amount.
Okay,
Not any
No,
meaningful amount.
we really didn't have a deficit. We really didn't have a deficit spending until the Civil War when we started we started getting into the business of working with business, and we were buying rifles back from broken rifles. We'd buy them back from private sector. The history is there that we had a balanced budget for quite a while.
a different time.
Even Louisiana Purchase didn't set us back that badly. So, and that was $15 million when that would probably today be 15 trillion. I don't know,
Exactly.
A lot more.
um,
Uh,
but the flexibility,
but those were different times.
the
Yes.
flexibility is built in there, David. Even if you have a balanced budget amendment, it's just submitting a budget that says we're going to meet all our obligations. Whether there's an emergency and you need to borrow, even with your personal budget, that happens. And then you have to make adjustments. Balanced budget just means introduce something that we can afford. And then if an emergency comes, deal with the emergency.
But we know how government operates, and government operates by is operated by men and women who have their own agendas and their own personalities and their own intentions. And so the intent, what you're saying, it sounds good. However, implementation is a different story, and that's where we're seeing Congress move very slowly, and they are in charge of the purse strings. And so, if they have an issue with bipartisanship and coming to
Mhm.
negotiated agreements, how we're going to get to an agreement on a balanced budget?
We
Uh,
don't even have a budget, David. We haven't had a budget in so long it's make my head spin. So at least give them an amendment to tell them they have a job to do and maybe they could get the freaking thing done.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
But
So about the
with
amendment.
a $34 trillion deficit, I mean, do we really? I mean, is this practical? Is this reasonable?
well,
So let's talk about.
technically, most of
Sorry to
that debt is with China, and China owes us for the COVID-19. And if we started to break down what they owe us, in fact, that they should actually pay back, they should be paying back for the stuff that we've had to spend. We could actually get 34 trillion. We could probably get that down to about 10 trillion, because we have debt with like countries like France and the EU. So I mean, if you really look at it, we could wipe out our China debt easily. Our debt with Japan might be a little bit more difficult. But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to say, hey, you owe us, so let's write this off and let's go forward. I mean, think about it. We could write off the entire $34 trillion deficit in no time whatsoever and start anew. But then, which our fear is, does the ruble or does the yen or does the EU, the euro decide, hey, your money's now worthless? Where do we go next?
Yeah.
So it's
So
not so
Okay.
easy.
uh,
Kellen,
uh,
Kellen.
Okay. It's tie rating time. So there are three things this amendment does. This proposed amendment does. Is proposed by Senator Lee of Utah. One of the things it does is, of course, enforcing a balanced budget. The second thing it does is it puts a physical spending cap, no more than 18% of GDP. This isn't the most severe limit, so it's not the biggest concern. But this is the wilder one, and require a supermajority vote in both the House and Senate before raising taxes.
three fourths. I mean,
Before raising
why?
taxes. Now, here's the thing. California has has a constitutional amendment in their state constitution, and it is a big reason they have so many economic struggles, because it is a tax amendment. Basically, what it says is that not only like supermajority, but also referendum. It has to pass through the people in order to adjust your taxes. What happens? What has happened is that California lawmakers avoid lowering taxes like the plague, because if you lower it down, it is stuck there permanently. Nobody, nobody in the referendum process that's required to make any tax changes happen in California will ever vote to increase taxes, even if it is the smart thing to do. And I think that is all that part of the amendment will do. And I would hope that should this go to convention, they strike it down for not working. Because if anybody lowers taxes, they will be stuck there permanently. As
Excellent,
much even though
excellent. Taxes are a burden that's placed on the people for no reason whatsoever, and there's not a single Republican in office in California, so there's no reason why they would ever want to lower taxes anyways. The only ones that are in office have no vote. It's almost like going to Tallahassee in the opposite direction. It
well
is
no, Joel,
a
there are
supermajority of
reasons.
Democrats. It's a supermajority of Democrats. They don't want they want more money because they want to spend more money so they can put more people out on the streets, so they can have more tent cities. Look, that California is not anything to be like talking about, because California, that's That's Ronald Reagan, and that's Schwarzenegger, that put in laws to make it more difficult for these people to raise taxes, and now it's backfiring because you have a majority of people that want to raise taxes. So,
That
Well,
was
look,
be,
I
Ronald
mean,
Reagan when he was a Democrat, right?
when he was a Republican, he was a Republican when
he was a Republican at the time.
he was a Republican when he was the governor of the state. So yes, he was
Thank you.
he was an excellent governor. He was an excellent president. He actually raised taxes, if you don't realize that. So people like, he did lower taxes, but he also did raise taxes while he was in office. He also did he did he took care of our immigration problem by dealing with amnesty, and you know that amnesty still didn't bring all the people in, because people still fear government. So those unfortunate people that didn't take advantage of the amnesty. So there's a lot of things. Ronald Reagan was
Yeah.
a fine president. I know
Yeah.
you have your issues with him, David, but
Yeah,
um,
man.
look,
Mhm.
Republicans have like I wrote an article for our blog and it just posted at 6:30 this morning. That was
Mhm.
what my show this morning was on is the Republican Party has its own issues, right? We have the ghost of
Mhm.
the Whig Party. We need to look at where we're at. That you have the No Labels Party, which I embrace after I ridiculed them when we first talked about them. But
So is the Article 5 convention one of the avenues of
the
having this
Article 5
conversation?
convention is the most important thing for us to get together and have these conversations.
Mhm.
Kellen makes a great point. Uh, he makes a really great point. They're not set in stone. They're suggestions. Yes,
Yes.
there's a portion that you say should be struck down. I agree. I think the term limits. I'm against term limits, but I'm not against the article.
The convention
Article
itself.
5, an Article 5 convention to talk about it. I was always a term limit guy until I started to find out how much it costs you, the taxpayer,
Right.
to switch out an office. When I
Yeah.
watched Congressman Micah leave office and and Stephanie Murphy come in, she didn't take anything that was already established. She eliminated it all. All of those furniture, all of that the office space, all of that stuff that went into mothballs so she could buy all new stuff, get all brand new office space. She had office space that was in the same building as the senator, which basically was a waste of taxpayer dollars. When I watched that and I started to research, I found out taxpayers don't realize how much money goes into those transitions,
Yeah.
but that's why voting somebody out has got to be your decision. So no,
Kellen, I
Article 5 convention, I'm a thumbs up on it, and I don't care
Yeah.
what they bring up.
Yeah.
Kellen, I know you wanted to say some more. Before you do, I want to
Yeah.
throw this out to both of you.
Yes.
Um, do you think that abortion would be
Yeah.
one of the areas that they'll discuss in this convention?
Yeah, it's going to be. I don't know whether or not they'll move anything through because I think there's a struggle with consensus because I think there's a large portion of those states that'll want to keep it within the states. I think a lot of them won't want to push it federal, so I doubt an amendment would get passed. I'm assuming it'll be brought up. But one more kind of remember earlier at the start of this episode when I said we were building a hospital, we are attacking the debt problem, via this amendment, but I don't think it solves the underlying issue, and that is a lack of follow through with economic plans. That's the way I see it.
Okay,
Because
I agree.
the common theory is that it is sometimes okay for a government to run a deficit during a time of recession. This is when it's important, even for Democrats, to lower taxes. You do and increase your spending. You do these things so that when the recession arrives, it doesn't get quite as bad. So that it's a less bad recession, and then you get back up to the good, healthy level of employment. When that happens, that temporary spending can go away, that the taxes can be raised. You run a surplus for a little bit going into your inflationary period. You pay off that debt that you paid, that deficit that you ran, and then you restart it because it's the business cycle. These things happen fairly routinely, with the rare exceptions of stagflations that happen due to supply shocks. What this amendment will do is prevent that type of action of happening. Period. If a recession comes and the in Congress can't out either they're hitting their GDP limit that this would impose, or they can't agree on exactly what to do, you get nothing. Are taxes going to be lowered? Maybe, but probably not, because because a lot of people will be fearful that if they lower taxes, they will never be able to raise them again. Will you be able to increase spending? No, you will not be able to increase your spending. And while that is a sort of flawed solution, it has been proven to mitigate some of the effects of it, even if it doesn't solve the recession itself. And then
I,
we're going to get to that period during inflation, and we're not going to
I
adapt
think
our policy to adjust for it. We're not
I think
going
you're
to.
attacking the economy in the Congress when it's done in the Fed by the Fed. So I
I'm
don't
talking
think that
fiscal policy,
I don't
not
think that the
monetary
balanced
policy.
budget amendment. I don't think the balanced budget amendment
Spend.
affects what you're talking about
No,
it
no, Joel,
directly.
you're
And
talking
I think
about monetary
David,
policy.
I, monetary policy is what
Is
makes
different.
your inflation and your yeah the print
It's a
the
part of it. It's a part of it. But I'm
Right.
It's
talking
a
You
about
have
whole
to take
bunch
into
of it, and it's an
consideration.
independent agency, so
yes,
it doesn't
absolutely.
work with the. I mean, to balance the budget, I don't think it has anything to do with your swings of. Look,
It does. It has everything to do with
I
you have two
disagree, though.
different economic mindsets, right? You have Keynesian economics, which we've been in Keynesian way too long now. We've been in
and
Keynesian
that's what I was
economics
saying.
to the point where we have the government so big, so bloated that and so much
Yeah.
money flushed into the system that we're out of control. That's Keynesian economics. That's the Democrat way of trying to get to employment levels, and we spend and Republicans have done it too. Eisenhower did Keynesian economics when he used the interstate program. So
Mhm. Yeah.
when I look at these things, monetary policy is the part where the balanced
Will not
budget
affect
doesn't
it.
affect. So
And it will.
inflation, deflation, and all that is it's your interest rates. If the interest rate
Yeah.
goes up, we end up borrowing at the new interest rate as a government. So the
Joel.
Fed affects that.
And I completely agree with you. I was never going to suggest that the Fed was going to be hampered. Monetary policy will stay intact, and monetary policy is very important at curbing inflation. However, there's a very limited amount it can do for unemployment, and it is not the biggest
Let me find it.
combative tool for those swings. And that swinging thing is what Keynesian economics is. A lot of Democrats misconstrue it for being massive spending and constant government intervention and everything, when what Keynes actually argued for was, you know, adapting your strategy as you go through. Actual that was what the actual theory is. People just don't understand it. But no, it would hamper fiscal policy. And while you could still regulate it to a degree through the Fed, you leave your most valuable tools, taxes, off the table, because taxes are the best way, and also like things like your regulations,
Mhm.
subsidies, breaks, things like that. You're
Tariffs.
not going to be limited in what you can do. Like, we passed the Chips Act. Whether or not the economic timing of it was opportune or not, you could argue that because it was a time of inflation, spending all that money into semiconductors maybe wasn't the best time. But that bill is still necessary because we need to build our own semiconductors for defense purposes. It's important for our foreign
National
policy.
security. Hmm.
So, this amendment, you're not just running a balanced budget, you ham fist your ability to invest in your defense. You hamper your ability to combat the worst of recessionary problems. You combat your ability to regulate, because if you need a regulatory office, forget it. Forget it. You're not going to get it now. And you're building a hospital to attack the debt, but you're not going after the problem that's causing it. And the problem that's causing it is, well, two things: an uninformed public and politicians that bend their knee to their every will. See,
Just special
when
interests.
special interests as well. I mean, it's a much bigger problem. I'm dumbing it down very intentionally here.
Okay.
Because people like low taxes and high spending. People approve the most of deficit spending policies. There's a reason that Donald Trump added more to the national debt than any other president. There's a specific reason, because COVID struck during an election year. It was election year time. We got to make interest rates low. We got to make taxes low, and we got to keep our spending constant. That is what voters respond to, and this has been very well documented. And that is what is causing us to balloon, because we're not willing to make the trade-off. We want to spend during
I
a
would
recession,
disagree with
but
that
not willing
also,
to
but
pay off.
I would disagree with that also, because it wasn't just because it was an election year that he kept rates low. He didn't keep interest rates low. The Fed kept rates low. The president
Fed.
has no say over how the
Yes,
interest
the
rates
Fed.
are.
Sorry,
So
the
again,
Fed.
the Fed works separately from the president. The president influences it
Yes,
by who he puts in
the
place. But
administration,
again,
not
let's separate the budget, the Congress, from the monetary policies, okay, that are done by the Fed. So I think that the Constitution, that the only thing in the the Fed is not even wasn't even constitutional.
no. It was
So
passed by the
it
Wilson
Right,
administration.
but
so
the knowledge from the Fed and from Congress and this avenue between the two, uh, they do
but
have to take into
Congress can't
consideration.
even look. Congress can't even
They
audit the
can't.
Fed. They can't even
No,
audit the
Right,
Fed.
right.
So
no,
this
they can't.
means that all our policies that you were talking about are controlled outside of the Congress. We're talking about a
Taxes are not.
balanced budget.
Tax
Taxes,
policies are directly controlled in Congress. Regulations are
correct,
directly controlled in Congress, and those
tax policies tax policies don't necessarily directly affect your inflation, deflation, stagflation.
they affect
Look,
the
So
effectiveness
if
of
I
let's
if
not
I
go
big
too
budget.
deep into this
I'm just saying,
into
because
What's the
monetary
meaning of
policy.
life, Joel?
look,
I mean,
I'm gonna tell you,
we get
I'm
it.
gonna tell you, we're talking two different things, and I'm just getting really confused because
I know
look,
what I'm
the
talking about.
balanced budget amendment has nothing to do with the monetary policy.
Okay,
But
Okay,
it's a
we
part
agree,
of it.
taxes,
It does
and we agree.
guide.
taxes.
And
It
I
does
agree.
guide.
It
Very,
obviously doesn't affect monetary policy. It only affects fiscal policy,
let's
but it
listen.
hand fists that fiscal
Let's
policy
let's put
from being effective.
let's put into place that we get the Constitutional Convention to eliminate the Fed and allow the federal government to run its own fiscal policy, and
They do fiscal policy.
then watch how wonderful our country runs itself right into a depression. So
Well, it
again,
won't.
my final word is on this is, look, it's great to have the convention. It's a democracy. It's a democratic thing. I wish that more Democrats would embrace it, because guess what? If you do, you have a voice at the table. You have a voice at the table. You can introduce your rules, because again, it has no rules, and the rules will be determined at the convention. The benefit, I love the Constitution, and this is one of the reasons I love it, is because it does things just like this. So I don't need to talk about what they're going to talk about at the convention, because we don't know what they're going to talk about at the
And
convention.
I
No,
and
exactly.
my final word here is I want us to be there at the at least Florida's convention when they convene and discuss uh, this the Article 5 convention issues, the proposed amendments. I hope that we're there.
Mhm,
Florida has not signed on yet, of course. They will be the 29th state if they did so quickly.
mhm.
They're at the threshold is 2/3 of the number of states, so that would be
Right.
34 states in agreement to call conventions and move this forward. So I'm looking forward to something historic, very historic for these
Mhm.
United States and for Florida, and be participants in. Kellen.
I wouldn't be surprised if it somehow got 33 states and barely missed it, but hey, there's also a great chance we'll get there. Like Joel said, we don't know everything that's going to be talked about. We know for a fact that the balanced budget amendment and the term limit amendments are being pushed as the main calling cards. So it is important to look at them. I think that tax rule, if we're going to be going down the route of the balanced budget amendment, I don't think we should. If we're going that, we need to just kill that tax point. I think it's just unproductive. Um, and yeah, ultimately, it's within the state's rights to do this. It's important to allow it. Disagree all you like. Joel's cat, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, like, comment, and subscribe for the kitty.
Yeah, just Yeah, she just can't get enough of you guys. She's purring and everything. She's like,
Aw.
"What are you
Somebody
doing
out there
talking to
loves
the?
us.
Hey,
We're
you're
getting
talking.
positive
Hey."
You
response.
love the cat. You know you
That's a
love the
thumbs
cat.
up. That's a
Oh, I
thumbs
hate
up
cats.
for you can't make
I
this
hate
shit
cats.
up for the three of us.
I hate cats. No, I love cats. Listen, guys, I appreciate this. This great topic.
Yeah.
Look, Anna, Anna, again, thank you for bringing something up that we can discuss. We can tear it apart, whether it's economic policies, whether it's abortion, which David, you are correct. It could bubble its way up. I would hope not, but look. I love the Constitution and I appreciate the conversation. So, like, subscribe. Hey, just give us your comments. Tell us where you think, hey, Joel, you shouldn't have interrupted Kellen. He was making a good point, or any of that stuff, because I truly believe that he's too smart for his own britches, but he's ours. So, keep him on board. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Britches are British. Don't like them. Have a good day.